This is a GFX 100 Mark II, and I'm going to share with you the settings that I use when I'm shooting stills. Now, one thing to bear in mind is that the autofocus settings for video and stills are completely different. So if you're used to one, don't imagine that you're going to be used to the other. So if I go through and have a quick look at the autofocus settings for video, you can see that we've got a choice of multi, wide tracking or area. Now, if I go through to stills and we'll take a little look at the settings, we've got a choice of single point, zone, wide tracking or all. Okay, so and as you can see, I'm on single point, and we'll come on to the autofocus settings in a moment because they're quite interesting for this camera. Let's take a look at some of the other settings first of all. Let's go to IQ. We've got here, if I go across and we have a little look, I'm shooting fine and raw, and that's because if the camera can only play back a JPEG. Okay, so if you have RAW only, the camera is playing back the JPEG that it's embedded into the RAW file, which is actually a low quality preview, and it's not even full size. So if you press playback and then you go in, zoom right into full, 100%, you're not actually at 100%. You're not at pixel level. You zoom in part of the way. If you shoot RAW and fine or super fine or whatever JPEG setting you want, it will play you back that JPEG, and you'll get it at high quality. And that's why I tend to shoot RAW and fine. I don't use the JPEGs, I just use the RAW files, but it gives me more flexibility in review at the taking stage. So I use lossless because why not? There's no reason not to. Now JPEG and HEIF. HEIF is apparently has a greater dynamic range, but it parks the last two bits of data. It's a 10-bit file rather than 8-bit file. It parks them the way that Fujifilm has set it up. I don't know whether it's the same at other camera systems, but it parks them below black level. So you actually got to slide the black level slider right up in order to reveal the two stops of dynamic range that are sitting below black. And so if you have HEIF set in camera, what will happen is that your pictures, when you're pressing review, you're not looking at something which is representative of the raw file. So first thing I would do is make sure it's switched to JPEG. So something like that. Simulation, film simulation, well, that's completely up to you. I've been using Pro Negative S now for 10 years. And it's all I've used for my colour, and I'm so used to it. I know exactly how it's going to render a particular scene or an image, and it just suits my style. I have a distinctive style that people can say, oh, I can recognise that as a Damien Lovegrove image. And part of that style, of course, is refining things down. I use just a few lenses. I use just my Pro Negative S for my colour work. And I use a Cross G for my monochrome portraits. So sometimes these things are quite useful to have. Let's go on down here. Let's have a little look. I've got dynamic range. Well, I leave that because Pro Negative S is quite a flat profile. I don't need to alter my dynamic range. I don't need to start thinking about dynamic range 400 or what have you. I just leave it on where it defaults to, which is 100. Because ultimately, even when I'm working with my tone curves, which will affect the JPEG, but it also affects what I see in camera here, of -1 and shadow tone and -2, also keep everything really flat. Now that means that I can see all my highlight details, I can see all my shadow details, and I shoot portraits. I don't go off and shoot landscapes at sunset where you've got a ridiculously high dynamic range with the sun in the shot and the foreground looking quite dark. So I don't have a problem like that. So I don't need to start trying to pull back data in the highlights or the shadows because everything's under my control. If I'm working in a very high contrast scene, like in sunlight, I will choose the background and the lighting and the position for my subject, my portrait, which gives me the control that I need for the picture. If I need to add more light for because I'm working in a dark space, I'll just add more light, but I'll add the right amount of light because what I'm looking at here is calibrated. So I leave that there. My tone curve has always been that way. It just means that if I zoom in on, if you were to take a picture of I don't know, supermarket car park or something with fluffy white clouds and brightly coloured cars and shadows underneath the wheel arches, and then you zoom in and you have a look around, you'll find that with these tone settings and this film simulation, I can see all my shadow detail. Everything that's in the raw file is there, and all my highlight detail too. I can see the detail in the puffy clouds. If I switch it to standard Provia and then 0 on the tones, I'm sort of guessing how much I can recover when I get into Lightroom. I can bring the slider back a bit. Oh yeah, there's more detail in the sky. I can lift the shadows up. Oh, there's plenty more in the shadows there. And so in order to avoid all that guesswork, I tend to have quite a flat profile set in camera, and it just looks nice. It reminds me, my imagery, the way I process my work, it reminds me of how classic sea prints used to look, normal photographic prints on optical prints on colour paper. It doesn't have the real depth of black and the high contrast of the Cibachromes and stuff. So, but it just looks lovely. It's perfect for portraits. Anyway, let's have a little look. What else we've got here? Actually, that's page 2 of 4. So we've got to scoot on down. Clarity, all that malarkey switched off. Don't need any of that. Color space, sRGB. It's the one that's defaulting camera and is there for a reason. You're not going to get more color in your pictures if you choose Adobe RGB. Adobe RGB is fine if you're doing flat copy artwork and you're sending the JPEGs straight out to be processed. Or if you're shooting those JPEGs or files are going to go off and be converted to CMYK. But if you're shooting RAW, then it really makes no difference. But it does. It makes no difference to the file, but it makes a difference to what you see. And if you have a sRGB set as your color space, skin tones look so much nicer on the back of the screen. Okay, so let's scroll on down. Pixel mapping, don't worry about that. Edit say. Yeah, so AF mode. Now, we mentioned this before. Single point is what I use. It just because occasionally, and I say occasionally, I mean really, it's quite rare, but occasionally the lens will be parked at minimum focus for some reason because it's on continuous autofocus, and I might have half pressed the button as I brought the camera out of the camera bag, and it might have focused on my feet or something, and then I put it on the tripod, pointed at my scene, and then oh, okay, it's out of focus completely. It hasn't found a face. And so I will just touch the back screen in roughly the area where the person is, and it'll just go trundle off there, and then suddenly it's picked up on face, no problem. I'm using face and eye detect. It's worth mentioning at this point that face and eye detect are different systems to this, single point zone, wide tracking, all that is a completely different system. Okay, so think of face and eye detect has its own feed from the sensor. And so you could have the picture set to so underexposed it's black on the back of the screen here, but it's still going to be picking out eyes and faces, okay, because it's got its own feed from the sensor and it overrides anything else you've got. So if you've got face and eye detect switched on, if it finds a face in the frame, bang, it's there. It ignores single point, it ignores zone, wide tracking, all that malarkey. It's just face and eye detect. That is the priority. Okay, so bear that in mind. And I love that because it means that I can shoot portraits and everything's honky-dory. If I want to shoot, let's say there's a shot where I've got someone a hat across the eyes and I want to just focus on the lips, I just press this middle button here, and what that will do is it will just switch off the face eye detect because I programmed, there's 3 buttons along the top. The middle one switches off and switches on, toggles face eye detect. The one on the left there toggles the eye. Now it's because I think this face eye detect malarkey, I think it doesn't know what eye is closest to the camera. I don't think it's sort of thinking at that level, because occasionally I'll be shooting someone who's slightly oblique to camera and it's focusing on the far eye. Now, I know that a lot of photographers want to focus on the nearest eye, and so what I do is I just have it on the far button there. If I find it's focused on the far eye, just tap the far button and it'll focus on the near eye, the left or right. It just toggles between the eyes. So it will, you've got control of that. So those are the only 2 focusing tools really that I use when I'm shooting my portraits. Either switch, if I need to switch it off because I want to focus on the lips or something else like that, or I just toggle the eye. that is it. So let's take a little look at other settings. So we've got, let's have a little look here. AFC custom settings. Take a look at this. Bang. I don't do ski jumpers very often, but I've got this set this way because it just seems to work the best. I've tried them all. Forget the picture, we're not taking pictures of ski jumpers, but the tracking sensitivity, I've got that set to 0 because I want it to be boom, 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 boom. I'm doing a still image and I want it to get to the next. I don't want a nice smooth transition. I don't want it to breathe the focus. I want it to be bang on. So anyway, I've got that set to 0. I've got the speed tracking sensitivity set to the middle bit. And I think the tracking sensitivity, if I remember rightly when I set it, I think it was, when something leaves frame, it waits a little bit before it decides to focus on something else, just in case it comes back into the frame. If it's going out and coming back in, it will just hold it there for a moment. I'll just wait and see. And then I don't want all that malarkey. Anyway, this I found works great. So I just leave it here because it just works for when I'm photographing people in the frame, portraits. It's perfect for me. Right, let's have a quick look at other things here just in case there's anything else. 425 focus points seems fine. I don't know. Back in the day when I was using single point and I was having to scoot it around on a tripod where I've not got any movement, give or take, I just used to work on the highest number of focus points. Handheld, you might want to drop that down because you can move it faster. And also the last little bit of frame, focus, reframe, it's not a big problem. But on a tripod, I want to nail everything down, so I work on the highest number. Yeah, so there we go. These are the things. Face eye detection. There we go. And have a little look at this. Auto for eye. Okay. And that works really well. As I say, I can toggle it left and right on the top there. It seems fine. If I was photographing some, people looking out of a window in one direction, 20 people or something, I might think, let's just leave it on right eye, let's try left eye priority. And it would be fine. But actually I don't do that. So I can't think of any other reason why you'd want to fix it to one particular eye. There we go. Instant AF setting. Let's have a little look at that. AFC. That's it. So that's fine. I don't think there's anything else I need to worry about here. Right, okay, let's have a little look at the flash menu. Well, we won't bother with that because it doesn't matter. I don't use it. I just don't, it comes out the box and it works, the flash. I just put my trigger on the top and I can control whether I'm working with TTL, HSS or all that malarkey from the trigger. In fact, I don't even need to worry about HSS. It does that bit automatically. And I don't use TTL anyway, so I just tend to work my trigger in manual mode. And the flash will it will work HSS if the shutter speed is high enough. The camera deals with all of that communication, which is fine. Let's have a little look across here. User settings, pretty obvious stuff. Don't need to worry about that. Sound setup, just got everything on silent. Screen setup. Here we go. So EVF brightness and that sort of thing. This is, I had to set this up, and that was in the previous video. You saw me and why and how I set this up. Image display I have on 1.5 seconds, okay, because that's that gives me, if you want to take a second picture, it's not good. You don't have to wait that 1.5 seconds for it to disappear. It just gives me an instant post view of what I've taken, so that, especially when I'm working with flash, I might take a picture with flash and it just pops up for 1.5 seconds, and I think that's enough. Oh, okay, I've got to take that flash down a little bit. It gives me enough of a preview to save me having to stop and press play and then have a look at the picture, and then it's just so much faster. So it's a really great thing to have, and so I have that on. Auto rotate displays, daddy electronic setting is on 2D. I don't want it on all this gyroscope stuff going on. But there we go. Fine, good. I don't think there's anything interesting we need to worry about there. Let's go across to custom settings. Now, this is quite interesting because I don't want all a load of stuff on my back screen like battery level and frames remaining and all that malarkey, because it's all on the top screen. I don't need to duplicate it, and I like the back screen for the image. The one thing I will let myself have on the back screen is the ISO and stuff. So, but I can toggle that using the display mode to switch it on or off. So let's have a little look. Framing guide. So I've got a focus frame. fine. The next thing I've got is aperture, shutter speed, ISO. Information background, fine. Nothing there, nothing there, nothing there. Movie mode, record time, yeah, okay, that you'd expect that in when I'm shooting movies. And mic level, that's quite useful when I'm shooting movies as well. No storage media warning. Well, why not? I mean, I've always put a card in the camera. It just sort of lives in there effectively. But that's fine. Frames remaining. I mean, there's no point having, I mean, for me, I've got 3,500 frames available on this card. It's a 512 Delkin card, a 1750 megawatts it's a second. Framing outline, I leave that on because when I'm shooting movies or video, it's 16:9 format. This is a 4:3 screen on the back, and it just shows me the top and bottom of the frame, especially if I'm working into a dark environment. So that's useful. Right, okay. Anything else on the screen? I don't think so. That's all fine. Okay. So, button dial settings, well, that's completely up to you. As I said, I got the little button on the front there next to the lens. I've got that set to preview exposure in manual mode because I use that all the time. I toggle that when I'm working with flash. I'll put that on so that I can preview the ambient, get the ambient the way I like it. Sometimes it's quite dark and moody. Then I'll switch that off so that I can then add the flash in, and then I'm looking at a scene that I can easily focus and do my framing with. So that's quite nice. So power management, I suppose that's the next thing to think about. We've got boost, AFN. N for I don't know, but anyway, I've got boost. All right, so and that works fine for me, and it's not just boost. It's boost and it's autofocus, priority normal, perfect. I don't tend to work in much low light stuff, and so I just got autofocus normal, and it makes a difference. It just means it's like right on there. I don't use an electronic viewfinder, so I don't need to boost my EVF resolution or frame rate. So yeah, there we go. That's fine. Auto power off, temperature high. I don't want it to power off, do I really? If I'm in a desert or something, I'll put a little fan on the back, but I haven't gone to a desert with this camera yet, so I've not bought a fan. I think that's it. So, hopefully that's been of use to you. And that's the settings that I use when I'm shooting stills with my GFX 100 Mark II.